WWII on the 15th of September 1940 as part of the Duxford wing. On that sortie, Tropic was shot down over Essex and killed. Kowalski survived the war, stayed in the RAF until 1947, made a new life in the post-war UK and died in 1986. Then it's our very welcome guest from the Czech Republic, the Hurricane 1 P3351 of the Litevsky Museum Tochna, the Tochna Flying Museum based at Tochna in the Czech Republic. An aircraft that served as number 73 Squadron, part of the RAF's Advanced Air Striking Force in France, and participated in the closing days of the Battle of France, which flew several operational sorties from different sites in France, including Eschmines, 73 Squadron's main advanced airfield northwest of Troyes. They then left France, came back to the UK when France fell in June, and that aircraft went on to fly in the Battle of Britain as well. It's a veteran of both the Battle of France and the Battle of Britain. It joined first combat just 2 days after the battle is officially deemed to have begun on the 12th of July. It then nosed over and a landing mishap and needed repair. It was allocated in September to number 32 Squadron by then at Accrington, flying North Sea patrol, but seeing no further combat. It then went to number 71 Eagle Squadron at Curtin in Lindsey and later at Martlesham near Ipswich. Its final RAF assignment was to an operational training unit before its RAF career ended, but it then went to the Soviet Union and flew with the Soviet Air Force at one of the Hurricanes supplied to them under Lend-Lease. Much later, the wreckage was recovered from the Soviet Union, brought back to the UK for restoration by Hawker Restoration, the company that has a great deal to do with the return to flight of many of these Hurricanes. It was returned to flight in New Zealand in the year 2000 as part of the Tim Wallace's Alpine Fighter Collection, for which it was returned to flight, but it then came back to Europe in the ownership of Jan Slivo-Rosen, basing it at Cannes in France, but the 10 Czechoslovak Squadron, based here at Duxford during the Battle of Britain, and the original aircraft with that serial, T3143, operated from Duxford from the 24th of July to the 16th of October 1940, shooting down 6 enemy aircraft. And that's believed, that Hurricane, was the sole airworthy aeroplane that flew in both the Battle of France and the Battle of Britain. We have Hurricane T2902, another Mark I, from Fighter Aviation Engineering, which flew with number 245 Squadron in 1940. Attached to Hawkinge in Essex. Kent, to support Operation Dynamo, the Dunkirk evacuation. It was involved in a Dynamo patrol near Dunkirk when it was attacked on the 31st of May 1940 and hit by a Messerschmitt Bf-109. It crash landed on the Dunkirk beach. The wreckage was subjected to a long rebuild. Today it's part of the Fighter Aviation Engineering Collection. We have Hurricane R4118, another Mark I, and another Battle of Britain veteran, with number 605 Squadron, completing 49 sorties and shooting down or damaging 5 Luftwaffe aircraft, UQ-88 and Messerschmitt Bf-110. This aeroplane, subject to an outstanding restoration to airworthy condition when it was in the ownership of Peter Bacher. It's today operated by James Brown of Hurricane Heritage. Again, it's based here at Duxford. And we have Hurricane 1 P3717, another Battle of Britain veteran, this time with number 253 Squadron. An aeroplane flown most notably by a Polish pilot officer WWII Samorinsky, and it shot down into his hands a Messerschmitt Bf-110 on the 30th of August 1940. Number 253 Squadron, incidentally, is a unit with which Eddie Peacock Edwards, about whom we were hearing earlier, served during the Battle of Britain. This aircraft also went to the Soviet Union. Again, later it was the subject of a restoration by Hawker Restoration. It's today owned by Jennifer Taylor and operated in memory of Hugh Taylor and daughter Sophie. Those then are 8 Hurricanes which have taxied to the western end of the airfield. The most Hurricanes ever flown in the modern era, we believe, though we can't be entirely certain, since the early 1950s up until now has been 7. We hope to go better than that by 1. on the roll. 8 Porter Hurricanes. Hurricanes.
Was right, and they were all shot down in quick time, with no pickings for us. I must confess I was very disappointed, for I had never fired at a Hun in my life and was longing to have a crack at them. So we swung round again and started to climb up to 18,000 feet over Southampton to rejoin our squadron. I was still a long way from the squadron when suddenly, very close, in rapid succession, I heard 4 big bangs. They were the loudest noises I had ever heard, and they had been made by 4 cannon shells from the Messerschmitt 110 hitting my machine. The first shell tore through the hood over my cockpit and sent splinters into my left eye. One splinter, I discovered later, nearly severed my eyelid. I couldn't see through that eye for blood. The second cannon shell struck my spare petrol tank and set it on fire. The third shell crashed into the cockpit and tore off my right trouser leg. The fourth shell struck the back of my left shoe. It shattered the heel of the shoe and made quite a mess of my left foot. But I didn't know anything about that either until later. Anyway, the effect of these 4 shells was to make me dive away to the right to avoid further shells. Then I started cursing myself for my carelessness. What a fool I'd been, I thought. What a fool. I was just thinking of jumping out when suddenly a Messerschmitt 110 whizzed underneath me and got right in my gun sight. Fortunately, no damage had been done to my windscreen before sight, and when I was chasing the junkers, I had switched everything on, so everything was set to a fire. I pressed the gun button, but the Messerschmitt was in no flame. He was going like mad, twisting and turning as he tried to get away from my fire, so I pushed the throttle wide open. Both of us must have been doing about 400 as we went down together in the dive. First he turned left, then right, then left and right again. He did 3 turns to the right and finally a 4th turn to the left. I remember shouting out loud at him when I first saw him, "I'll teach you some manners, you hunt." And I shouted other things as well. I knew I was getting him nearly all the time I was firing. By this time it was pretty hot inside my machine from the burst petrol tank. I couldn't see much flame, but I reckon it was there all right. I remember looking once at my left hand, which was keeping the throttle open. It seemed to be in the fire itself, and I could see the skin through the knot, yet I had little pain. Unconsciously, too, I had drawn my feet up under my parachute on the seat to escape the heat exposure. Well, I gave the Hun all I had, and the last I saw of him was when he was going down, with his right wing lower than the left wing. I gave him a parting burst, and as he disappeared, started thinking about saving myself. I decided it was about time I left the aircraft and bailed out, so I immediately jumped up from my seat. But first of all, I hit my head against the framework of the hood, which was all that was left. I cursed myself for a fool, pulled the hood back, wasn't I relieved when it slid back beautifully, and jumped up again. Once again, I bounced back into my seat, but I had forgotten to undo the straps holding me in. One of them snapped, so I had only 3 to undo, and I left the machine. I suppose I was about 12 to 15,000 feet when I bailed out. Immediately I started somersaulting downwards, and after a few turns like that, I found myself diving headfirst to the ground. After a second or 2 of this, I decided to pull the ripcord. The result was that I immediately straightened up and began to float down. Then an aircraft, a Messerschmitt I afterwards heard, came tearing past me. I decided to pretend that I was dead, and hung limply by the parachute strap. The Messerschmitt came back once, and I kept my eyes closed. But I didn't get the bullets I was half expecting. I don't know if he fired at me. The main thing is that I wasn't hit. While I was coming down like that, I had a look at myself. I could see the bones of my left hand showing through the knuckles. Then, for the first time, I discovered I'd been wounded in the foot. Blood was oozing out of the lace holes of my left shoe. My right hand was pretty badly burned too. So I hung down a bit longer, and then decided to try my limbs, just to see if they would work. Thank goodness they did. I still had my oxygen mask over my face, but my hands were in too bad a state to take it off. I tried to, but I couldn't manage it. I found, too, that I had lost one trouser leg, and the other was badly torn, and my tunic was just like a lot of torn rags, so I wasn't looking very smart. Then, after a bit more of this dangling down business, I began to ache all over, and my arms and legs began to hurt a lot. When I got lower, I thought I was in danger of coming down in the sea. I knew I didn't stand inertly if I did, because I wouldn't have been able to swim strokes with my hands like that. But I managed to float inland. Then I saw a high-tension cable below me, and thought it would finish me if I hit that. Fortunately, I was traveling towards a nice open field. When I was about 100 feet from the ground, I saw a cyclist and heard him ring his bell. I was surprised to hear the bicycle bell, and realized I had been coming down in absolute silence. I bellowed to the cyclist, but I don't suppose he heard me. Finally, I sat down in the field and fell over. Fortunately, it was a very calm day. My parachute just floated down and stayed down without dragging me along, as they sometimes do. I had a piece of good news almost immediately. One of the people who came along and who had watched the combat said they had seen the Messerschmitt 110 dive straight into the sea, so it hadn't been such a bad day after all.
The voice there of